If anyone ever connects my name to his, I could lose my job, my home, maybe even my life. That's the truth I swallowed the night the most feared man in the city slid a folded bill across my table and quietly paid my rent without ever saying a word. I was a waiter who learned early how to disappear. Not literally, but emotionally. You learn it when you earn so little that dreaming feels irresponsible. When your smile is part of the job description. When customers look through you, not at you. When your entire existence is measured by how quietly you refill glasses and how fast you apologize for things that aren't your fault. I learned how to become background noise. How to move without being noticed. How to make myself useful but never memorable. My body showed up, my voice followed a script, and my feelings stayed locked somewhere deep, where rent notices and empty refrigerators couldn't reach them. At work, I was efficient. Polite. Replaceable. At home, I was tired. That night, the restaurant was loud in the way only tired people pretending to enjoy themselves can be. Plates clinked endlessly. Laughter spilled over wine glasses, too sharp, too forced. Someone argued softly near the bar. City lights bled through the windows, smeared by fingerprints and steam, turning everything into soft, glowing blurs. I was exhausted. My feet ached like they were bruised from the inside. My shirt clung uncomfortably to my back, damp with sweat I didn't remember earning. My heart was somewhere far away, counting bills, replaying worries, reminding me that tomorrow would look exactly like today. I was wiping down a table when the door opened. I didn't notice him right away. Not consciously. But something shifted. The room didn't stop. It didn't go silent. Music still played. Conversations continued. Yet the air itself seemed to tighten, like it had pulled in a careful breath and decided to hold it. I felt it in my chest first. A subtle pressure. A quiet alertness I hadn't asked for. I looked up. He was already inside. He wasn't loud. Didn't scan the room. Didn't announce himself with confidence or arrogance. He simply existed, and somehow the space around him rearranged itself to accommodate that fact. People didn't move away from him exactly. They adjusted. Dark suit. Perfectly fitted without trying to be impressive. Calm posture, shoulders relaxed but ready, like he'd trained himself never to slouch. His eyes didn't wander. Didn't rush. They watched, slow, deliberate, like he was cataloging details most people ignored. Not hunting. Observing. I didn't know who he was yet. I just knew my chest tightened when my section manager leaned in and whispered, "Take his table. Be careful. Be careful." The words slid under my skin and settled there. I'd heard that tone before, used for angry customers, unpredictable ones, the kind who complained loudly or tipped badly or both. But this was different. There was no irritation in my manager's voice. Only caution. Those words followed me like a warning bell as I walked toward him, each step feeling heavier than the last. Why him? Why me? I straightened my shoulders out of habit. Smoothed my expression into something neutral and pleasant. The mask I wore best. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady out of practice, not confidence. "What can I get you?" He looked up slowly. Not surprised. Not rushed. And held my gaze. It wasn't the kind of look that undressed me. Not rude. Not invasive. Just intentional. Like he was actually seeing me, not the role I was playing. My breath stuttered, just slightly. "Whatever's quiet," he said. That was it. No smile. No charm. No attempt to soften the moment. But his voice, low, controlled, slid straight under my skin, settling somewhere deep and unsettling, like a door opening in a room I'd forgotten existed. I nodded, suddenly too aware of my hands. "Of course." As I turned away, I felt his eyes follow me, not in a way that made me feel owned, but in a way that made me feel noticed. As if my movements mattered. That alone made me uneasy. I brought his drink first. Set it down carefully, the glass making the faintest sound against the table. My fingers brushed the condensation, cold against my skin. "Thank you," he said. 2 words. Calm. Polite. Most people said it without looking up. He didn't. I returned with his food a few minutes later. Placed the plate down. Stepped back. Each time I stood near him, I felt that same strange pull. Like standing too close to a fire I couldn't see. The kind of heat you don't notice at first, only later, when the burn finally reaches you. I told myself it was imagination. Fatigue. Hunger. But my pulse betrayed me every time I was near his table. He ate slowly. Thoughtfully. Like time wasn't pressing down on him the way it pressed on everyone else in the room. Between bites, his gaze drifted, not aimlessly, but with purpose, resting on small things. The door. The corners. The reflections in the window. Once, I caught him watching me. Not when I thought he would. Not when I was near his table. But when I laughed quietly at something a coworker said, a sound that slipped out before I could stop it. His eyes sharpened slightly, like he'd found something interesting. I looked away quickly, heat rushing to my face. Why does that matter to me? I refilled his water. Cleared an empty plate. Each interaction brief. Controlled. Yet something about him lingered long after I stepped away, like the echo of a low note that didn't quite fade. I felt unbalanced. Exposed. As if my careful invisibility had a crack in it. And I didn't know whether to cover it, or let it widen. By the time I moved on to my next table, my heart was beating faster than it should have been. And I hated myself for wondering, quietly, foolishly, what kind of man walks into a room like that and makes the air itself pay attention. When he finished, he didn't rush. Most people did. They checked their phones, waved for the bill, shifted impatiently in their seats like the restaurant was something to endure rather than inhabit. But he stayed where he was, back straight, hands folded loosely on the table, eyes distant. Not unfocused, just far away. Like he was carrying a weight that didn't belong in a small restaurant filled with laughter, cheap wine, and half-hearted celebrations. I told myself not to stare. I failed. Every instinct I'd trained into myself, look busy, don't linger, don't make eye contact unless necessary, fell apart under the quiet gravity of him. There was something unsettling about the stillness he carried. It didn't read as boredom. It felt deliberate. As if he was allowing the noise around him to pass without ever touching him. I wiped a counter that didn't need wiping. Pretended to check on another table while my eyes kept drifting back to him. What are you thinking about? The thought startled me. I wasn't supposed to care. Then he stood. The movement was smooth, unhurried. Chairs scraped softly nearby. Someone laughed too loudly behind me. The restaurant continued breathing around us, unaware that my chest had tightened again, that something small and fragile inside me had gone alert. I waited a beat, counted silently the way I did when nerves threatened to take over, then went to clear the table. My movements were automatic. Plate. Glass. Napkin. Muscle memory took over while my mind stayed tangled somewhere else. That's when I saw the tip. My breath caught so hard it hurt. For a second, my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. The number didn't make sense. It didn't belong there, folded neatly against the receipt like it was just another polite gesture. I thought maybe my eyes were tired. Maybe the numbers were blurring together the way they always did after long shifts, after too much standing and not enough eating. I counted once. Twice. The room tilted. My hands started shaking, so badly I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. It was more than my salary for 6 months. 6 months. Rent. Groceries. Utilities. The late fees I pretended weren't piling up. The kind of money that changed the shape of fear. A sound left my throat, small, broken, humiliating. I swallowed hard, heat rushing to my face, my ears ringing. This wasn't generosity. It didn't feel warm or casual or thoughtless. It felt deliberate. Precise. Like a message written in a language I didn't yet understand. My chest tightened painfully. My first instinct wasn't gratitude. It was panic. I spun around, heart racing, scanning the room like he might still be there, like I could undo this before it became real. He was already at the door. Before I could think, before fear could catch up to instinct, I followed him. The door swung open, and the night air slapped my skin, cool and sharp, like it was trying to wake me up. The city hummed around us. Cars passed, headlights streaking by. Somewhere down the block, someone laughed, careless and free. "Sir," my voice cracked, thin and fragile in the open air. "Please. There's been a mistake." He stopped. Turned. The streetlight carved his face into sharp shadow and soft gold. Up close, I noticed things I hadn't before. A faint scar near his jaw, barely visible unless you were looking for it. The exhaustion behind his calm, tucked so carefully beneath control that most people would never see it. "No," he said evenly. "There hasn't." The certainty in his voice made my stomach drop. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it felt painful. I can't accept this." The words came out rushed, desperate, like if I said them fast enough, this could all rewind. "I don't know you." "I didn't." His gaze softened. "Just slightly." "You already did," he said. "I didn't agree to anything," I said quickly, the panic rising. "I didn't." "You agreed," he interrupted gently, "when you showed up tired, and still treated me kindly." The words landed somewhere deep. Somewhere raw. I stared at him, breath unsteady. That wasn't how the world worked. Kindness wasn't currency. It wasn't supposed to be worth anything, not anymore. "I don't even know your name," I whispered, like that alone should make this impossible. "You don't need to." I hated how calm he was. Hated how steady he looked while my knees felt like they were about to give out. The imbalance between us made my skin prickle. "There are no strings," he continued, his voice low but clear. "No expectations." "People don't do this," I said, shaking my head. "Not without a reason." He studied me for a moment. Really looked at me. Then he stepped closer, just close enough that I could smell his cologne. Clean. Subtle. Expensive. The kind of scent that lingered long after someone left. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the reason is simply recognition." Recognition. The word echoed in my chest, unfamiliar and heavy. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to carry it without breaking something inside myself. Before I could respond, before I could ask another question or say something foolish, he turned and walked away. No name. No explanation. Just the sound of his footsteps fading into the noise of the city, swallowed whole by traffic and distance. I stood there long after he was gone, the folded bill burning through my palm like a secret I wasn't sure I was allowed to keep. When I finally went back inside, the restaurant felt wrong. Too loud. Too bright. Like I was out of sync with it now, half a second behind everyone else. I finished my shift in a daze, smiling when required, apologizing automatically, my mind replaying the same moments over and over. The street light. The scar. Recognition. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my mattress staring at the ceiling, the room lit faintly by passing headlights. Every sound felt amplified, the hum of the fridge, footsteps in the hallway, the distant sirens that never quite stopped in this part of the city. I replayed every second. His voice. His eyes. The way he looked at me like I mattered in a way that had nothing to do with service, or performance, or usefulness. I checked my phone again and again, half expecting a message. A call. A demand. Something to justify the money folded so neatly inside my bag. Nothing came. The money stayed untouched. Heavy. Accusatory. Morning crept in slowly, pale light seeping through thin curtains. My body felt hollow, wired and exhausted at the same time. I dressed mechanically, movement stiff, as if I were afraid any sudden action might make the night feel less real. The next day, my landlord didn't knock. That alone was enough to make my stomach twist. No sharp rapping on the door. No muffled cough followed by impatience. No envelope shoved under the frame with red ink screaming overdue. I stood there listening to the silence, heart racing, waiting for the sound that didn't come. The relief was sharp and immediate, and followed just as quickly by guilt. The next week, he didn't call either. No reminder. No threat. No passive-aggressive note slipped under my door. Nothing to explain what he'd done. Nothing to claim it. And somehow, that was the most unsettling part of all. On the third week, I came home from work and froze. The hallway light flickered the way it always did, buzzing softly, casting uneven shadows along the walls. My feet still hurt from the shift. My shoulders were tight. I was already halfway through mentally listing everything I needed to do: shower, eat something cheap, sleep, when my eyes landed on the floor in front of my door. An envelope lay there. Not crooked. Not crumpled. Slid neatly under the door like it belonged. My name was written on it in careful handwriting. Not rushed. Not flashy. Just precise. For a moment, I didn't move. My pulse climbed into my throat. Every rational part of me wanted to pretend I hadn't seen it, to step over it, to come back later when my hands weren't already trembling from exhaustion and something much closer to fear. But my body betrayed me. I bent down slowly, as if the envelope might bite, and picked it up. It was heavier than it should have been. My fingers shook as I slid it open. The paper inside was crisp, official. A receipt. Rent. Paid. 6 months ahead. The words swam in front of my eyes. I read them once. Twice. 3 times. Each time hoping I'd misunderstood, hoping there was some fine print that would wake me from this strange, suspended reality. There wasn't. My breath left me in a rush, sharp and shaky. My knees gave out, and I slid down against the door until I was sitting on the floor, my back pressed hard against it like I needed the solid wood to keep me upright. 6 months. The number echoed in my head like a drumbeat. No late fees. No warnings. No negotiations. Just paid. I pressed the heel of my hand to my mouth, trying to keep myself quiet. My heart pounded so loudly it filled my ears, drowning out the hallway noise, the hum of the building, everything except the rushing panic inside me. 6 months meant safety. 6 months meant breathing room. 6 months meant I wouldn't have to choose between food and rent, between rest and overtime, between dignity and desperation. And that terrified me. There was no note. No explanation. Just a signature I didn't recognize at the bottom of the receipt. Clean. Confident. Final. The weight of it pressed into my chest like a hand, firm and unyielding. Fear finally caught up to gratitude. It crept in slowly, curling around the relief until I could barely tell where one ended and the other began. Who does that? Why me? And what did he expect in return? The questions looped endlessly, sharp and unforgiving. I stayed there on the floor far longer than I should have, staring at the paper in my hands like it might suddenly speak. Eventually, I folded it carefully and set it on the small table by the door, like placing something sacred down before it burned me. I slept badly that night. My dreams were restless, tangled with images of folded bills and shadowed faces, of doors opening and closing without sound. I woke up more than once with my heart racing, convinced I'd heard a knock that never came. When morning finally arrived, it didn't bring clarity. I went to work the next day feeling like I was walking through water. Every movement took effort. Every sound felt distant. The city looked the same, cars, people, noise, but I felt slightly out of phase with it, like I was watching my life from a step behind. At work, everything continued as if nothing had changed. My coworkers laughed near the host's stand, trading jokes I barely registered. Orders came in rapid bursts, the printer spitting tickets like it always did. Somewhere in the kitchen, a plate shattered, followed by swearing and then laughter. I smiled when I was supposed to. I nodded. I apologized. Inside, my thoughts spiraled. I replayed his voice. His eyes. The calm certainty with which he'd spoken, like paying 6 months of rent, was no more complicated than ordering a drink. I told myself not to hope. Hope is dangerous when you're poor. Hope makes you careless. Hope convinces you that safety can last. I had learned early that stability was temporary, borrowed at best. You never leaned into it. You never trusted it. You waited for the floor to drop out from under you again. So I told myself this wasn't kindness. It was something else. Something I didn't understand yet. He didn't come back for days. Each evening, without meaning to, I found myself glancing at the door. Every time it opened, my heart jumped, sharp and stupid, and then sank just as quickly. Relief followed disappointment in equal measure. Relief because I didn't know what I'd say if he did come back. Disappointment because some part of me wanted answers more than safety. The absence stretched. And in that space, my imagination filled the gaps with things I didn't want to think about. Control. Debt. Obligation. Every possibility felt heavier than the last. Then, one night, there he was again. Same table. Same quiet presence. It hit me all at once. My stomach flipped violently, like I'd missed a step on the stairs. The room seemed to tilt, sounds dulling as my focus locked onto him. I stood frozen near the service station, my body refusing to move. My manager noticed before I could recover. "Go," she hissed under her breath, already irritated. I swallowed and forced my legs to work. Each step toward his table felt deliberate, measured, like I was approaching something volatile. Every instinct screamed caution. Every lesson I'd learned about survival told me to keep my distance. I set down his water, my fingers gripping the glass too tightly. The condensation chilled my skin. "I didn't ask for this," I said under my breath, keeping my eyes on the table. "I know," he replied calmly. The steadiness of his voice unsettled me more than anger would have. "You paid my rent." "Yes." The word was simple. Unapologetic. "Why?" My voice shook despite my effort to control it. I hated that he could hear it. He looked up at me then. Really looked at me. Not past me. Not through me. At me. Like he wasn't afraid of what I might see in return. "Because you shouldn't have to choose between dignity and survival." The words landed harder than the money ever could. They cut through layers I didn't even realize I'd built. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "That's not your responsibility," I whispered, my throat tight. "No," he agreed. "But it's my choice." Choice. The word lodged itself deep in my chest. Choice wasn't something I was used to associating with help. Help always came with conditions, spoken or not. Help was something you paid back one way or another. But he said it like it was simple. Like it was allowed. From that moment, nothing felt neutral. Every glance carried weight. When our eyes met, it felt intentional, charged. Every silence stretched too long, filled with things neither of us said. When I brought his food, my hands were steadier than I felt. When I cleared his plate, my heart raced like I'd done something forbidden. Every tip he left, always generous, always discreet, felt like a test I didn't know how to pass. I never thanked him. He never asked me to. That somehow made it worse. Coworkers started noticing. "Why does he only come when you're on shift?" someone asked one night, eyebrows raised. "You must be lucky," another said with a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Or careful," someone else joked, voice light but gaze sharp. I laughed along, the sound automatic. But inside, fear curled tighter in my stomach. Because luck didn't explain this. And whatever this was, it wasn't finished. One night, as I cleared his table, he spoke again. "They're watching you," he said quietly. My pulse spiked. Who? People who notice patterns. I swallowed. Should I be worried? His gaze flicked to the room, then back to me. "Only if you stop being yourself." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," he said slowly, "don't let the world convince you you're invisible." Later that night, as I walked home, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Be careful. My steps faltered. Another message followed instantly. You don't know who you're standing next to. Cold spread through my veins. I stopped walking. Turned slowly. Across the street, parked half in shadow, was a familiar car. And behind the windshield, barely visible in the dark, I knew, without knowing how, that he was watching. Not threatening. Not chasing. Just watching. Like he already understood something I hadn't yet admitted to myself. That the money was never the most dangerous thing he gave me. It was attention. And once you're seen by a man like him, disappearing is no longer an option. I went back to work with my nerves stretched thin. Every sound felt sharper. Every laugh too loud. Every shadow suspicious. I kept expecting the world to tilt, for something bad to happen, because that's what you learn when something good shows up uninvited. You wait for the cost. He didn't come for days. The first night, I told myself it was relief. That the tight feeling in my chest was just leftover fear. The second night, I kept glancing at the door without meaning to. By the third, I hated myself for noticing his absence like a missing note in a song. Why am I disappointed? Why do I care? Thunder rolled low over the city that evening, a distant growl that rattled the windows. Rain smeared the streetlights into streaks of gold and white. The restaurant was half full, the kind of night where conversation stayed low and people leaned closer to hear each other. I was refilling a table's water when the air shifted. I felt it before I saw him. He sat in my section again like he'd never left. Same posture. Same quiet gravity. Same dark suit that made the dim lights feel dimmer. My pulse went wild. For a moment, I stood frozen, my body arguing with itself. Part of me wanted to turn around, pretend I hadn't seen him, let someone else take the table. Another part, louder, traitorous, was already moving. I approached him slowly, my legs unsteady. "I didn't ask for this," I whispered as I set down his glass, my voice trembling despite myself. "I know," he replied without hesitation. "That's why it stays clean." Clean. The word settled over me like a blanket I didn't realize I'd been craving. I hated how safe it made me feel. I hated how much I wanted to believe him. I straightened quickly, creating distance. "You don't get to decide what feels safe to me." His gaze lifted, steady. "You're right," he said. "You decide." I only remove obstacles. That scared me more than any threat could have. We didn't talk much after that. Not because there was nothing to say, but because everything felt too close to the truth. Instead, there were looks. Lingering pauses when I brought his food. The way his eyes followed me when I walked away, not possessive, not obvious, just attentive. Silence heavy with things unsaid, like a held breath that never quite released. Sometimes, I caught him watching the door, his jaw tight, as if he was listening for something I couldn't hear. Every time he tipped, always excessive, always quiet, I felt the line between gratitude and danger blur until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself I was in control. Then came the complication. It happened on a slow night, when boredom made people reckless. I was leaning against the counter, waiting for the kitchen to finish an order, when one of my coworkers nudged my arm. "Hey," she murmured, eyes flicking toward my section. "Do you know who that is?" I followed her gaze, my stomach already tightening. "A customer." She let out a small, nervous laugh. "That's not a customer. That's a ghost." I frowned. "What does that even mean?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "People disappear around men like him. Not loudly. Quietly. One day they're there, the next, nothing." My breath caught. "What are you talking about?" I asked, though a cold certainty was already blooming in my chest. She swallowed. "My cousin worked security downtown. He said that man doesn't exist on paper. No records. No trail. Just influence." The kitchen bell rang, sharp and sudden, making me flinch. Mafia Boss. The word crawled through my mind, ugly and loud, poisoning everything it touched. That's who he is. That's what I've been standing next to. I should have run. I should have asked my manager to move my section. I should have quit, walked home, locked my door, and never looked back. Instead, I stayed. I took a shaky breath, picked up the plates, and walked back to his table. Because when he looked at me, I didn't feel owned. I felt chosen. I set the food down carefully. My hands were trembling now, there was no hiding it. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I hesitated. "People are talking." "They always do," he replied. "They say you're dangerous." He studied me for a long moment, then asked, "Do you believe them?" I opened my mouth. Closed it. "I don't know what to believe," I admitted. "That's fair," he said. "Fear grows fastest in uncertainty." My heart thudded painfully. "Then tell me the truth." His gaze hardened, not with anger, but with something like resignation. "Truth isn't always kind." "I didn't ask for kindness," I said. "I asked for honesty." Silence stretched between us. The rain intensified outside, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. "I won't lie to you," he said finally. "But I won't drag you into my world either." "You already did," I whispered. "No," he said gently. "You're still standing on the edge." The words lingered with me long after he left. The closeness deepened in small ways after that. Not touch. Never touch. Instead, it was moments. The way he waited until my section emptied before coming in. The way he noticed when I looked tired and ordered for himself without making me ask. The way he remembered things I mentioned once, offhand, my favorite tea, the song I hummed when I thought no one was listening. Once, when a customer snapped at me over a spilled drink, I felt his gaze sharpen across the room. Not angry, controlled. Protective. Later, as I cleared his table, he said quietly, "You don't deserve that." The simple validation almost undid me. Why does this feel so dangerous? Why does it feel like home? Some nights, I caught myself wondering what his life looked like when he wasn't here. What rooms he occupied. What secrets he carried so easily in his silence. Other nights, fear crept back in. What happens when people notice me noticing him? What happens when kindness turns into something people want to punish? One evening, as I walked home under flickering streetlights, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. You should stop seeing him. My steps slowed. Another message followed. He doesn't save people. He buries them. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned a corner, scanning the shadows, every sound suddenly too loud. At my door, I hesitated before unlocking it, my hands slick with sweat. Inside, my apartment felt smaller than ever. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone clenched in my hand, staring at the screen. Is this the cost? The next night at work, he noticed immediately. You're distracted, he said. I met his gaze, fear and defiance warring in my chest. People are warning me. His expression tightened. About me? Yes. A pause. Heavy. Dangerous. You should listen to them, he said quietly. That wasn't what I expected. My throat tightened. Is that you telling me to stay away? His eyes softened, just a fraction. It's me giving you an exit. I swallowed hard. What if I don't want one? For the first time since I'd met him, something like vulnerability flickered across his face. Then, he said slowly, things get complicated. The word hung between us like a loaded weapon. And as I walked away, heart racing, one thought refused to leave me. I wasn't just standing near danger anymore. I was choosing how close to step. He started coming late, when the restaurant emptied. Not rush hour late. Not casually late. Late enough that the noise softened, that laughter thinned out, that the kitchen lights dimmed and conversations dropped into murmurs. Late enough that the city outside felt closer than the people inside. Late enough that it felt intentional. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. That powerful men kept strange hours. That I was imagining meaning where there was none. But then he started waiting. Not impatiently. Not obviously. Just present. He would sit at the same table, his coat folded beside him, eyes scanning the room like he was counting exits. And when I finally approached, he would look up as if he'd been expecting me specifically. How was your day? He asked one night, casually, like it was the most normal question in the world. I froze for half a second. No customer ever asked that. Not really. Not unless they wanted something. It was fine, I lied, the word automatic. He tilted his head slightly. You say that when it wasn't. My chest tightened. You're observant. I have to be, he replied. After that, it became a thing. How was work today? Did you get enough sleep? You look tired, more than usual. Each question peeled back a layer I'd spent years building. And the worst part? He remembered the answers. The way I liked my tea, no sugar, extra hot, even though everyone said it tasted bitter. The book I mentioned once, laughing awkwardly about how I pretended I'd finish it someday when life slowed down. The fact that I hated the sound of raised voices, even playful ones, because my childhood apartment had taught me that loud usually meant bad. He remembered all of it. And he never made a show of it. He just knew. That kind of attention does something dangerous to a person who's spent their whole life unseen. One night, the rain came suddenly. Not a gentle drizzle. Not romantic. It came hard and fast, slamming into the pavement, forcing people to scatter, umbrellas snapping open like startled birds. My shift ended late. Too late to outrun the storm. I stepped outside and immediately stepped back again, soaked in seconds. He stood under the awning, hands in his coat pockets, watching the rain like it was an old enemy. "You'll catch a cold," he said. I laughed softly, hugging my arms. "Looks like I already lost." He shifted slightly, giving me space under the awning without making a big deal of it. Our shoulders didn't touch, but I felt his presence like heat. The rain trapped us there. The city blurred beyond the curtain of water. Streetlights smeared into gold lines. The air smelled clean and sharp. "You're not afraid of me," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. I swallowed. "I am." He glanced at me, surprised. "Just not in the way people expect," I added. Silence. His jaw tightened. "That's dangerous." "For who?" I asked before I could stop myself. "For you," he said immediately. Then, after a pause, softer, almost to himself, "For me." My heart stumbled. The tension between us thickened, pressing in from all sides. From that night on, everything intensified. Stolen glances stretched longer than they should. Lingering silences replaced safe small talk. Conversations edged closer to truths neither of us quite touched. Sometimes, our hands brushed when I set down his cup or cleared his plate. Each time, my heart thundered like it was warning me. Or begging me. I hated how aware I became of him. The way his presence grounded me and unsettled me at the same time. The way my body leaned toward him even when my mind screamed caution. Why him? Why now? Why did danger feel so much like comfort? Then the twist hit. It happened on an afternoon I wasn't even supposed to be working. I'd picked up an extra shift, because rent doesn't care about emotional turmoil. I was crossing the street on my break when I saw him. At first, my brain refused to register it. He stood outside a private building downtown, dressed sharper than usual. And beside him, her. Elegant. Tall. Effortlessly beautiful in a way that felt practiced. Her hand rested on his arm like it belonged there. Like she'd done it 1,000 times. They stood close. Too close. Something sharp tore through my chest. Jealousy burned, hot, humiliating, unwanted. I turned away quickly, my face heating with shame. What did I think this was? Of course I was just a charity case. A project. A distraction. That night at work, I couldn't bring myself to go near his table. I pretended not to see him. Asked another waiter to cover. Stayed busy. Stayed far. I hated myself for caring. When my shift finally ended, I stepped outside and stopped short. He was waiting. Leaning against the wall across the street, coat collar turned up against the cold, eyes fixed on me like he'd been counting minutes. "You're pulling away," he said. "So are you," I snapped, anger flaring to cover the hurt. Or maybe I just finally saw the truth. He went still. "What did you see?" he asked quietly. "That I'm convenient," I whispered, the words tasting bitter. Disposable. Something dark flickered in his eyes. "You're wrong." "Am I?" I laughed harshly. "I saw you today. With her." Realization dawned. "She's my sister," he said immediately. The world tilted. Shame crashed over me, heavy and suffocating. She's the only family I have left," he continued. "And the only one who can stand close to me in public without consequences." My throat burned. "I'm leaving," he went on, voice tight. "Everything I've done for you, it was preparation, not possession." The words hit harder than any accusation. Preparation for what? I asked, already dreading the answer. "For you to survive without me," he said. That broke me. The restraint I'd clung to shattered completely. "I don't want to be protected from you," I said, tears spilling freely now. I want to choose you. Silence wrapped around us. Cars passed. Rain started again, softer this time, like the city was listening. He stepped closer. Slowly. Carefully. Like he was holding himself back with every breath. If you stay, he said, voice rough, you'll never be ordinary again. I looked at him, this dangerous, quiet man who paid my rent without claiming my soul, who watched me like I mattered, who offered exits instead of cages. I've been invisible my whole life, I said. I'm not afraid of being seen. His hand hovered near mine. Didn't touch. Not yet. The space between us vibrated with everything unsaid. The final decision hung between us like a loaded secret. And as the rain washed the city clean, as neon lights reflected off wet pavement and the world held its breath, I realized something terrifying and true. He didn't save me. He gave me a choice. And I chose the man who loved me quietly. Because loving him loudly would cost us everything.